What's up guys, it's Kristen here today with my January wrap-up. Now January was another great reading month for me. I read a total of 6 books. A couple of them were misses, but another couple I think will turn out to be some of my favorite books of all time. They were that amazing, especially the very first book that I read of this year, which was 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel, Garcia, Marquez, and it was translated by Gregory, Rabassa. This book was so amazing. The writing is just beyond beautiful. It is a magical realism book following one family for 100 years in a mythical town in South America. This book is a little bit difficult to describe other than that you are following this family, because for me it was so unique in that it's not set up that you have to figure out some kind of mystery at the end or something has to be resolved. It's very much a meandering type book. You're really just following the family and what's gonna happen every decade and just seeing what will unfold next, which was such a great experience for me reading it because you can really just sit there and enjoy the writing and enjoy the characters and not feel like you have to be paying attention to see if you can figure out the clues along the way or what's gonna happen next. Also, the magical realism in this book is just amazing. There is a reason why Marquez is considered the father of this genre, because I don't think anybody does it better. I read this definition that said it is the writing style where the supernatural becomes mundane and the mundane becomes supernatural, which kind of sums up this entire book. It's so brilliant because the tone of the narrator is always the same no matter what's happening, even when these insane events are happening, like it rains for 5 years straight, somebody lives till they're 150, or gypsies come through and kind of do magic. It's talked about as if it's completely normal. There are a lot of characters in this book, as happens when you follow a family for about 7 generations, but I really felt like I fell in love with each and every one of them and really got to know them. But the only confusing thing is that they tend to reuse the same names over and over again, so I had to refer back to the family tree at the beginning of the book many times, and I've heard not every edition has this, so if you're going to read it, definitely find an edition with this family tree. So of course this was a 5-star read for me. The writing is just so incredibly beautiful. I can't even describe. The story is amazing. I loved how it ended, and if you're into magical realism at all, you need to read this book. So for my YA book of the month, I read Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is a high fantasy book. It is set in a world where this small town has to give up one of their young women every 10 years to this dragon wizard, and then he takes them away to go live in their tower. Nobody really knows what happens while they're gone, but he does this because he helps keep away the evil force, and so the townspeople give up one of their young women as an offering to him of sorts. Now, this book is incredibly hyped up. I have heard amazing things about it. I had pretty high expectations, and I am very sorry to say that this was just not the book for me. Even from the very beginning to the very end, which I did finish the book because I'm pretty obsessive about not DNFing books, I was just never hooked into the story. I didn't really care what was happening to the characters. I just had zero emotional investment in it. This was a combination of reasons. One being, I'm not a fan of Novik's writing style. I don't think it's necessarily bad, it's just not my preferred style. I like very lyrical, poetic type writing, and this felt a little too descriptive for me. I also didn't feel like she explained the magic system in the world, so I was always a little bit confused about what was going on. But most of all, I had a problem with this evil force that they're fighting against. Of course, I'm being vague for people who haven't read it yet because I don't want to spoil anything, but I applaud the author for trying to do something very unique and different in fantasy books, but the whole time I was reading it, I just couldn't buy it. It didn't make sense to me, so it was really taking me out of the story the whole time. This is one of those books that I can see why people like it so much, and I totally get it. I think it just really wasn't for me. So in the end, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, but you know what? This cover is absolutely gorgeous, so no regrets on that end. For my nonfiction read of the month, I read Dead Mountain, the untold true story of the Dyatlov Pass incident by Donnie Eichar. This is the story of 9 hikers in 1959 who were going through the Russian mountains, and they were all of them found dead, but they were found in such mysterious circumstances where their tent had been ripped open. All of them were found in different locations about a mile away from their tent. None of them wearing proper winter clothing, and this is in the mountains going into Siberia. Some with very mysterious injuries on them, and for the past 50 years, nobody has been able to figure out what happened to them that night. So the author, Donnie Eichar, who is a documentary filmmaker, decided to go investigate himself. He went all the way to Russia and attempted to kind of retrace the steps of the hikers all the way up through the mountain pass to see if he could get some more evidence, and he dug up all of the old case files and all of the pictures that they took along the journey and their journal entries to try to see if he can put the pieces of the puzzle together. But what was so amazing for me reading this was how well he humanizes each of these hikers. He starts off the book with a picture of all of them, and you feel like through the journal entries and the pictures that you really get to know them and their unique personalities, and I just felt so incredibly sad for what happened to them, and especially for what their family members must have gone through. Not only their death, but then on top of that, never finding out what actually happened to them in the end. Of course, we are never going to know exactly what happened to the hikers in the end, but the author puts forth what he thinks is the most compelling theory. I was definitely convinced by it, but again, I was just more sad about what had happened to them and how tragic the circumstances were. I gave this book 4.5 stars out of 5. I thought it was absolutely amazing, wonderful writing, and even if you're not a big nonfiction fan, this was just a great mystery that you had to find out what happened next. Then I had my book club's pick of the month, which was the Furies of Calderon. This is the first book in Jim Butcher's Codex Alera series. It is a high fantasy book set in a world where everybody has a connection with one of the elements of earth, air, wind, fire, and metal, and they can really manipulate them for different purposes. The story is told from multiple POVs all about this huge power struggle that's going on in the land of Alera and several different groups trying to take over. The first half of this book, I was loving it. I thought it was action-packed. I love the world building. I felt like I was really getting to know the characters. I like the political intrigue of it in the power struggle. I like that there's multiple POVs. I know that's not for everybody, but I felt like it really gave a good perspective on the different angles, especially when you're dealing with politics. There are always two sides to every story. But then the second half of the book is completely filled with fighting and battle scenes. The book is about 600 pages. It felt way too long for me. I don't like Jim Butcher's writing style. It's overly descriptive, unnecessary. I've heard that this is the weakest book in the series, but I really don't have any interest continuing on with it. This was a 2-star read for me. And also there was one scene in particular where it was describing the raping of a woman, and it felt very unnecessary to me, made me feel extremely uncomfortable, and I'm not sure why it was put in there. My literary fiction pick of the month was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is a book set in the South in the 1930s, mostly following one African-American girl. Cece is about 14 years old when the book starts, and you hear about some horrific things that happen to her, things that should never happen to any child, and for that reason, trigger warnings definitely. Then she is forced to marry a very angry, bitter man who treats her terribly. She is told by everybody in this book that she is worthless, that she is ugly, she is uneducated, that nobody wants her. But she fights through everything in this story, and I just love her character so much. The whole book is written in the form of letters, mostly from the perspective of Celie, and it is written out phonetically in the southern slang, which at first I wasn't sure about, but then you just get used to it so quickly, and I can't imagine it being written any other way. Alice Walker's writing is just beyond amazing. Again, this is a very short book with large print. How she managed to encompass so many amazing themes in this one little book is beyond me. One of my favorite things in books and authors' writing style is when they can write very concisely. It's probably why I'm such a huge fan of Salinger, but this is also what Alice Walker does so amazingly. She can write something in a couple of sentences that seems almost deceptively simple at first, but then you just have to sit there and really think about it and let it hit you. She gives very few descriptions of the settings or what the characters look like, which I also love because it feels like the writer telling the reader that you are smart enough to fill in the blanks for yourself, and maybe that's not necessary. Let's just get to the heart of the story. I was also pleasantly surprised that there was an LGBT relationship in this book. I've heard that in the movie, which I haven't seen yet because I just finished this, that the relationship between two of the women is more just hinted at. Of course, it would have been extremely controversial in 1930s South. But in the book, it is made very explicit that they are together, which was very nice to see. It is a very gritty and real novel. It does not shy away from these difficult topics, which of course at times makes it difficult to read, but then there is always this sense of hope throughout it. So in the end, I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. Of course, I am still dying to see the movie adaptation, but I would recommend this to everybody. And lastly, for my children's lit book of the month, I have The Reptile Room. This is the second book in Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events. I read the first book last month and there are 13 in total, so hopefully if I can read one book a month, I will have them finished by the end of this year. I only got halfway through it because it just came in at the library, but again, I am loving it, following the Baudelaire children and their hilarious antics. I love the writer's style where he kind of breaks the fourth wall and the narrator talks to the reader and saying things, you know, like, this is a really sad story. I told you it was nothing good was gonna happen to them. If you wanted to read a happy story, you should have found a different one. And I think that is just absolutely hilarious and so much fun to read. So that is it for all of the books that I read in the month of January. Again, some of these I feel like are gonna be my new favorite books of all time. I would love if you would comment below if you've already read some of these books and we can discuss them. Again, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you again soon. Bye!